Hi guys, and welcome to part one of Adobe Illustrator, how to use it basically. I'm just going to go over simple stuff in these tutorials to help you get started, get you on your way. So today is just a bit of an intro and the first couple of tools, so let's get started. I'm going to leave the camera rolling here and I'm going to have it down in the bottom so you can watch the screen and you can see me and I can talk to you, and why you'd want to see me I have no idea, but anyway, it's going to be there, so we're good to go. So, starting with Adobe Illustrator. Basically, what is this program? It's one of three Adobe programs that I'm going to be running these little how-to tutorial for you guys. Starting with Illustrator, then I'm going to do InDesign and Photoshop, and just a basic kind of teaching you how to use the tools. What does this do? What does that do? Have a bit of fun. You guys can watch and then jump away and play with some stuff. So, Adobe Illustrator is a program for editing vector artwork. It's used for creating graphics, for creating logos, vector graphics, a lot of cartoony style stuff, but you can do photorealism stuff in it as well. Now, you're probably sitting there going, what is vector graphics? So what I've done as a starting point is to show you a little bit of a comparison, just to give you a visual example. There's a lot more information about this in your notes and all of your workshop stuff, but just to show you, so what I've got here is a document I've set up in Illustrator. You can see I'm in Illustrator. And I've got an image of a black circle that I have created in Photoshop, which is for editing in pixels. We'll talk more about Photoshop later on. But an image I've created in Photoshop of a black circle, which is a JPEG, therefore it is a raster image or a pixel-based image. And what I'm going to do is, next to it, is create the exact same black circle here in Illustrator. And this is now vector artwork. This is raster or pixel-based artwork. And you can see at this difference, there's not a whole, at this distance, sorry, there's not a whole lot of difference between the two. You can kind of start to see the edge. But to put it really simply, and again, there's a whole bunch more about this in your notes, but pixel-based artwork is artwork which is made up of a whole bunch of little squares of colors. If people do photography, it's a little bit like grain. That's what pixel is. So our digital screens, computer screens, whatever screen you're using, tablets, phones, they all display with pixels. And so raster-based artwork is based on those pixels, little squares of colors, whole bunch of them make up the artwork. Vector-based artwork is artwork which is based on like mathematical equations. So without getting too technical, it's basically points and the relationship between those points, whether that's a line or it's a closed path which has a fill, a color on it. It's just points and what happens between those points. The main difference between the two is pixel-based artwork is obviously resolution dependent. So you can't increase and decrease size too much because you start to lose quality. Vector-based artwork is completely open slather. You can make it as big, as small as you want, and you won't lose any quality. And just very quickly to show you, and then we'll get going, the difference between the two. If I zoom right in, and you can see we've gone in here 600%. We'll go in a bit further. You can see we're at 1200%. We start to see the pixels here in the JPEG image I've brought in, and you can see that the vector next to it is completely clear, and if we go right in this close, you can see the difference between the two. We've got the pixel set up here of the JPEG and the vector artwork. So there's a bit of a visual demonstration of what's going on and what the difference between vector artwork and pixel artwork is. So, no, I won't save that. So, that's basically what vector files are, the benefits of vector files. You don't have to worry about size. If you're creating artwork for a tiny little logo to put on a business card or to be blown up to put on a billboard, doesn't matter. You're not going to lose quality. You can increase or decrease the size as you like. So just looking initially at the Adobe, and I'm obviously using Adobe CC, as most of you guys will, but if you're using earlier versions, they're pretty similar. You might see the odd difference, but you'll recognize what's going on. Just a very quick overview of what we have. You've got your document here. I've created a new document. You've got your toolbar over here. A lot of these tools I'll be going through over these tutorials that you can look through. We've got our color guide over here, so you've got a color picker, or if you prefer to use the little sliders like this, you've got your CMYK slider to give you color values. Alternatively, you can click on these to change your colors. I'll talk about these in a second. Down here, we've got our layers palette. So for those of you familiar with Photoshop, you'll know what layers are, but Illustrator also has layers. It just allows you to put different elements of your artwork onto different layers, so you can turn layers on and off, you can have things over the top of each other, you can have layers interacting with each other, things like that. You've also got a set of default swatches. If you go over here to your swatches palette, you can add to these swatches, you can take them away. You've got a whole bunch of swatch libraries. I won't go too far into that, but just to let you know, at any time if you're working with a particular color, you can drag that color over to your swatches palette and it will create a new swatch. So in terms of just creating a new document within Illustrator, I'll talk about that. So we go up to File and we go New, and it'll bring up this new document box. Obviously you can name it here initially if you want to. Profile will just allow you to pick whether it's for print or for web or for screen or something like that. I'm just going to go with print. Size, you've got your standard sort of A4, A3, things like that. And then if you wanted to go and input your own particular size, you can do down here. Bleed is really important. I'm going to cover off more about bleed when we talk about InDesign. But if ever you're doing print work, guys, make sure you always have bleed on the artwork, at least 3 millimeters of bleed. What bleed is the area around your document, extra printing area. You'll generally have 3 or 5 mil, which allows us then to print, and then you can trim back so you have color right to the edge. So yeah, I'll talk more about that when we get into InDesign, but that's where you can add bleed. So once you've done all that, obviously I missed your orientation. You've got your portrait and landscape here. So we press OK, and ta-da, we're given a brand new artboard to work with. Now I always like to change it just because I'm used to using older versions of Illustrator, and you would always see your artboard like this with white. So to do that, I just go to View and Overprint Preview. You don't have to. If you prefer the grey view, that's fine. It's just whatever you prefer. So the first thing I want to talk about are these two little, this sort of white box here and this black stroke box, and what they do. These allow you to add color or to change the color of the fill and the stroke of a particular path that you create. So just as an example to show you how they work, if I just grab this rectangle tool here, and I'll talk more about these shape tools in the second tutorial, but just showing you what the stroke and fill do. If I draw a shape like so, and I select that shape by using this tool, the selection tool, I will cover that in more detail in a second, but if I select that, you can see if I go and grab a green, right, I've now changed the fill of this path or this shape to green, and the stroke is still set to black. What I might do is set the stroke to none, and you can see I've now created a green square. Wow, I'm like the best artist ever. Anyway, so that is what your stroke and fill do. So you can use swatches from your swatch palette over here. You can use the color guide up here to change the color of your fill and your stroke by adjusting your cyan, magenta, yellow, and black inks. You can also double click on this, which will take you into like a color picker. So you can zoom around like this, or you can, move your color picker along and pick whatever color you want to use. Or if you've got the exact values of colors you want to use in your CMYK, in your RGB or hexadecimal, which is for web people. They'll know what I'm talking about with that. That's what you can do. So there's a whole bunch of ways. I'm not going to leave it on that awful color, but there's a whole bunch of ways that you can change the color. But I just wanted to, straight off the bat, let you guys know that you've got your fill and your stroke. And if I was wanting to change one of them, you just click on stroke, and then I can pick on that, or as I said, double click. So that's how we add strokes and fills to our shapes or our paths that we create. First tools I want to talk about are the top two, these two arrow tools. We're going to start at the top. What a great place to start. So you've got a selection tool and a direct select tool, or direct selection. So the selection tool allows you to grab the whole part of a shape or a path or something you've created. The direct select tool allows you to click on select and move just particular points of shapes or paths that you've created. So again, I'm going to draw my green. I'm going to bring back my green square because we loved it so much initially. Hang on. And it's professional. So what we're going to do is show you the difference between those two tools. So with my selection tool, you see I can click on this shape to select it. I can move it around my artboard like so. I can move it outside of my artboard if I want to. I can also, with the edges here, I can manipulate this shape. So I can move it in like so to squash it, or if I can move it in from the bottom to squash it, or if I move it in from the corner, I can resize the entire shape. Now if I hold down Shift, that will constrain the proportions of that square. If I don't hold down Shift, I'll be able to sort of just go a bit crazy with it. You can also go on the corners and rotate any shape. That's basically what your selection tool allows you to do. Allows you to select shapes and move them around. The direct select tool, so the white arrow, allows me to select individual points of my shape. And so you can see if I click on it, by default it will select all four corners. So these anchor points, these are the paths when I spoke before about points and the relationship between those points. These are what I'm talking about, the anchor points. If I click on a particular anchor point, see how this one's like a dark blue and the others are white? That means I have that one selected, and so what I can now do is move that point on its own. Move it around individually to create interesting shapes. You can select multiple, so if I select on this one, hold the Shift key on my keyboard, select the bottom one, I can move those together, and I can move them up, and we can create a whole bunch of different things. But essentially, that's the difference between the two arrow keys. You have the selection tool, which allows you to select the entirety of a shape, and the direct select tool, which allows you to select individual points of that shape. We're going to look at drawing within Illustrator, and we're going to start off with the most simple tool. Look, I probably would recommend you never use it because it's pretty basic and awful, but at least I'll show you it's there and you know about it. It's this pencil tool here. Anytime you're not sure what a tool is, guys, if you hover over that tool with your mouse cursor, it will bring up a little label of what it is. So I'm going to do it now. It's going to make a liar of me. There we go, pencil tool. So click on the pencil tool, and that is just a freehand drawing tool like you've got a pencil. I'm just going to swap my fill over to my stroke, and you'll see as I draw like this, wee, look, yay, it's so cool. Right, I've drawn a line, and what Illustrator has done has converted my freehand drawing into a big swirly path, which is green because I had green selected. If I now select on it and change my stroke color to orange, I will have orange scribble. Yay, it's so good. And if we wanted to get some magenta, which is a color I invented when dudes were wearing like pink shirts all the time a few years ago. It's all about the magenta. So we can go, yay, look how pretty it is. Oh, that's right, it does that now. It makes a liar of me because I need to deselect. Anyway, you guys get the idea. It's a freehand drawing tool. Obviously works a little bit better if you're using like a Wacom tablet. I'm using a mouse, but I never use this tool anyway, so it really doesn't matter. Yay, look, I made it pretty. So that is the pencil tool. It's just completely free drawing, a bit like tools that you would use in Microsoft Paint if you ever did as a kid, or things like that. But like I said, very rarely going to use it. I want to talk more about the pen tool, which is sort of 3 above it there. Probably the most powerful and useful tool within Illustrator. And what the pen tool allows you to do is create your own paths, create your own points, create curves between those points, and I'll talk very quickly about how that all works. But I just want to say, see this there's a little white arrow in the corner of a lot of the tools up here in the toolbox. That means that there's extra tools behind that one that you're looking at. And if you hold the tool down, it allows you to select those other tools. And then if you go over here to the little white arrow, which is like drop this toolbar out, what that will allow you to do is sort of bring that out as a separate toolbar on the side. So with the pen tool, we're going to look at drawing with the pen tool. We're going to look at adding anchor points, deleting anchor points, and converting anchor points. So pen tool at the ready, you click and it creates an anchor point. You click somewhere else and it creates another point, and I click somewhere else and I click somewhere else, and yay, and we make really 90s style sharp edged shapes. Beautiful. I did an art. But you can see that's how the pen tool works in its most basic form. I'm just going to delete that. Obviously, you don't want to be drawing like that. You want to be drawing with curves and such. So if I click and click again, this time I'm holding my mouse button down. Don't let go of the mouse button, and drag out. You can see I start to create a curve. And as well as creating a curve in the line, you'll see that I've made this other line with these 2 weird dots on the end of it, what we call the handlebars. And they allow you to manipulate the curve once you've drawn it as well. And the reason that there's one on either side of the anchor point is because it's showing you where the curve has been and where the curve will go. So it's important to remember that you need to keep that in mind with your curve, so you get nice smooth curves, that your handlebars are sort of directing in the area you want to go as well. So if I now let go, you can see rather than that being straight for my next line, I'm getting to draw a bit of a curve, and we'll click and we'll drag out like that, and then I might click and drag. Ooh, fancy schmancy. So you can see by clicking and dragging, I am creating now curved shapes, and I've created a monster. Yay, look at him, he's cool. Keep in mind that anything I'm doing here, guys, you can always go back and manipulate. Just as I showed you before, you can jump back with your direct select tool. You can click on particular points and move those points, or now I can click on the handlebars to adjust, muck around with the curves and things like that. So you've always got that option available to you. I wanted to speak about the add and delete. So the add points will do exactly as it says on the box. It's going to add more points to the shape you've created. So if I click here, I can add points. If I decided that I wanted to have this bulging out more for some reason, or I wanted this to, I don't know, you'll see what I'm doing. But I've only got a point here and a point here, and I really desperately need a point here for whatever I'm creating. I can click, I can add a point there, jump back with my direct select, click on that point, and I can now manipulate it like so. Similarly, the delete points will delete points. Now, if you've got what we call a closed path, this is a closed path in the sense that where I started it, I went around and I made all this beautiful stuff, but I ended up coming back to the very beginning and closed the path off. Then when you delete a point from a closed path, Illustrator will just meet those 2 next points up. So if we delete a point like so, because this is a closed path, you can see Illustrator just naturally joins the path back up together for me. The last thing I want to show you as part of the pen tool options is this anchor point shift. Sorry, the anchor point tool, or the convert anchor point, as it's, well, everyone I know calls it that, but anyway. What that will allow you to do is change what is a curved point, which has the handlebars, into a straight point. And so to give you a demo of that, what we'll do is I'll just draw a new shape over here. I'll grab my pen tool, I'll click and I'll drag and I'll make a nice curve like so. And what I might do is swap over my stroke and fill. So you see this just as a line. I'll make my stroke a little larger up here with the stroke options. So you can see that this has a curve. If I click on this middle point, right, I have my handlebars. If I grab this little convert anchor point here, what that will do is it will change that back to a sharp point. Get rid of those handles that are adjusting my curves and change that back to a sharp. And at any time you can click on it again and convert it back to a curve, and that will give you your handlebars again, and we can make our lovely curves again. Yay, it's so pretty. So again, for a closed path, if I wanted this to be like a sharp horn out of my awesome monster's back, I could click on this point and you can see it converts what was a curve. If I undo, nice curve, click on that and we get a sharp point. So that is the 3 tools within the pen tool, adding and removing points. The last thing I just wanted to cover off in this first lesson is the stroke options. So you saw I played around with my stroke a little bit here by increasing the size, but I just wanted to show you another couple of things you've got available to you. So what I'm going to do is set this to be a stroke color. I'm going to set this to black. It's gone back to 1 point as default. And all I've done here, guys, is I've just moved over to the side. I'm just working on the side of my artboard just because I'm funny like that, and that's what I do. I'm going to click and I'm going to draw a line. And what I've created is a lovely straight line here because I held shift, which has a black stroke applied to it, and it is 1 point. So some of the options I'm showing you are available up the top here, but I just want to look at the stroke palette over here in your palette on the right. If yours looks a little like this, let's just get rid of the updates. If yours looks like this, that's fine. You can, I think that's the stroke there from memory. Yep, it is. So you can click on that to access your stroke. Otherwise, if you click on this little double arrow up here, it will expand the panel out and you'll see everything. So looking at the stroke palette here, and what I want to do is go to show options, which brings up this whole bunch of other stuff, and I won't talk too much about it, but I mainly want to show you the fun parts of it. So with that stroke selected, I can increase the weight of the stroke or the thickness. So at the moment it's 1 point. I can have it set to 10 points. I can have it set to 100 points, which is nice and thick. Or you can set it anything you want in between. If I want it set to 0.7546, then I can set it to 0.7, I'll round it up, 7.55, but you get the idea. So what I'm going to do is set this to about 3 point, right? So this is now 3 points thickness. If you want a dashed line for a stroke, guys, you can click on here and say, yes, I want a dashed line. Ta-da, we have a dashed line. Look, it's so pretty. Let's do it on the side like this. Let's do it this way so it's not vertical. There we go. It's still just a line, guys. You can still add to it. You can click here with your pen tool and add away and draw. It's just a different type of stroke added to that shape. If you want to change how long the dashes are and the gap between, you can do that here. So this is set to 12:12. If I set it to 20:10, you can see I'm now just increasing the size of the dash and the size of the gap between. If I set it to 20:20, it will be even. 20:20, you guys get the idea. So that's the dashed line. I also just wanted to show you very quickly, there's different types of strokes. You can put a different end on either end, saying end too often, but either end of your stroke. So you've got your start point and your end point, different arrowheads and things like that. So we can pick like a fancy arrow tail like that, and we can pick a cool arrowhead, and yay, look, we made an arrow. It's still just a stroke, guys. You can increase the weight and they will increase accordingly. You could jump in here and convert it to a curve, and it's still just a line. I just wanted to show you some of the things that are available in your stroke palette. Okay, so I hope you're all still awake. I've probably bored you to tears, but that is at least the first little bit, part number 1 of our intro to Illustrator. If you enjoyed it, keep watching for part 2. Thanks, guys.